Is Tomid con Dáil an Niamh ifigig ón Ryan Cultúr Oireachtas agus Gaeltacht model le Oireachtas stratéise féochta gedi fé agus Project Ireland fé dahad agus tá fáilte roimh ar fad tacht an seo an Niamh Catherine Licken an Rooney Generalta agus na do cólaki ar fad atá an seo rointige chunig ben seo Hannah Shiv right eile. So tá seachtdaoine an seo said le cat to either corner but denime ar dúspáire seo rá just gwil an tafod omlan. So so le tosáimid le bhó féinise bhála mo cornúil ar chormhúr ard go bhfuil de bhua alt seachtaige dó eil de nacht clúbhile cámíle san naí fine hé faoi cosint ag glán pribléid mad leis an féinise a thugann siad don coiste seo. Má ordítar an coiste déobh ábh éirí as an féinise a thuirt I le ní áirithe agus má leanann sibh á thuirt níl sibh I didal dá éist sin ach pribléid cháilethe I lena féinise agah. I'm directing you kind of in relation to your statements that by virtue of Section 17(2)(L of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in relation to their evidence to the committee. However, if you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to that effect. Where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any persons or entity in the name, by name or in such a way as to make him or her or it identifiable. I also wish to advise you that the opening statement and any other documents you have submitted to the committee may be published on the committee website after this meeting. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary privilege to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the House or an official either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. So, Cormaid Tush leis an córa an Niamh agus tugam cuire de inis de Catherine Licken an córa láthir dhéanamh agus le bhuail atá lei a chur an náithne chur mágat.
Gurmí mágat a chahirirlik agus gan buchas liver as an deis a hachta láthair ag an sesiún seo de cuid an chóchoiste chun obair na rinne phlé inális an rátéis stratéise agus a curry bhaim an chlár in eisteachta faoi hunscadal éireann fithe dahad in eisteacht in our Gultúr, in our Janga agus in our Nairacht. Chair, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to attend this session of the Joint Committee and to discuss the Department's work in relation to our Statement of Strategy and the implementation of our investment programme under Project Ireland 2040. Investing in our culture, language and heritage. I look forward to the discussion ahead and hearing the views of the committee members. I'd first like to introduce my colleagues with me here today. Conor Falvey on my right is the Assistant Secretary with responsibility for our culture programme, encompassing culture policy, oversight of the national cultural institutions, Culture Ireland, the Creative Ireland programme, the Audiovisual Action Plan and other areas. Niall O'Donoghue, also on my right, is the Assistant Secretary for the Heritage Division, which includes responsibility for the National Parks and Wildlife Service, the National Monument Service, the Heritage Council, our national parks and nature reserves, as well as support for all aspects of our built and natural heritage. Representing the Gaeltacht and island communities, as well as promoting the use of the Irish language outside of the Gaeltacht, are Micheál O'Connor on my left, followed by Sorcha de Bruch. Micheál is príomhfeicteach an Gaeilge taobh muid an Gaeltacht, Sorcha de Bruch príomhfeicteach Ileán Forras Teanga agus Loganamnacha, and Seán McGowan príomhfeicteach Gaeltacht agus Pleanáil Teanga. The Department plays a key role in protecting, preserving and promoting Ireland's culture, language, built and archaeological heritage, as well as our biodiversity and our unique landscapes. It encompasses a wide range of functions, from support for the arts and culture, to conservation and safeguarding of our biodiversity, to supporting sustainable communities. Its remit also extends to Ireland's global identity and national well-being, as well as fostering enterprise and tourism development. The work of the Department speaks directly to our understanding of ourselves, to our national identity. It anchors us in our past through the safeguarding of our cultural, built and archaeological heritage, gives context to our present through the Department's Decade of Centenaries programme, and sets out the values we want to protect in our future through the National Heritage Plan, Heritage 2030, among others, and obviously the 20-year strategy for the Irish language. The Department is also a key driver of well-being across government, through opportunities to experience and participate in arts and culture, to engage with our natural environment in our national parks, and to appreciate our language and heritage, including our islands. It occupies a unique space within government with its very broad policy and programme remit, as well as a presence in every part of the country, in our national parks and monuments, in cultural centres, schools and local authorities, and through our direct involvement in Gaeltacht and island communities. The Department delivers on its broad remit to support and promote culture and creativity in Ireland in partnership with the 8 national cultural institutions, the Arts Council and Screen Ireland. It works closely with the Heritage Council and Waterways Ireland to protect and safeguard our built archaeological and national heritage. And in supporting and sustaining Gaeltacht communities, the Department works with Údarás na Gaeltachta, while also partnering with Foras na Gaeilge in promoting the Irish language more generally. And Commissioner Changa, which has a statutory role to play in safeguarding the Irish language, also falls under the aegis of the Department. Our work engages directly with communities across the country through the work of the National Parks and Wildlife Service, the National Monuments Service and our colleagues in Gaeltacht Division. We work directly with and through local authorities, most recently to deliver on a national programme of fostering creative communities. Our Statement of Strategy covers the period 2018 to 2020 and was prepared in accordance with the Public Service Management Act, following the appointment of Minister Josepha Madigan to the Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht. We are now over just 1 year into its implementation. The Department's overarching mission is to promote, nurture and develop Ireland's arts, culture and heritage, to support and promote the use of the Irish language and to facilitate the development of the Gaeltacht and the islands. Our core functions are to provide policy and funding support for the development of the arts, culture and creativity, including cultural infrastructure development, to provide oversight of Ireland's national cultural institutions, to protect and preserve Ireland's natural heritage in line with national and EU legislation, national policies and strategies, and to support sustainable development, to preserve our built heritage as part of the regeneration of our cities, towns, villages and countryside, in accordance with the principles and values of Project Ireland 2040, and to protect our unique archaeological heritage, and to support the Irish language and strengthen its use as the principal community language of the Gaeltacht. We also assist in the sustainable development of island communities, including through the provision of transport links, and we promote North-South cooperation through the work of Waterways Ireland and on Foras Changa. These functions are translated into action through a number of policies and strategies. They include Culture 2025, the Audiovisual Action Plan, the 20-year strategy for the Irish language and associated 5-year action plan, the Tourism Interpretive Master Plan for the National Parks, the National Biodiversity Action Plan and Heritage 2030, which is still at consultation stage. To deliver on this policy framework, we structure our work across 3 policy divisions, supported by corporate divisions. These are Culture Division, Heritage Division and Gaeltacht and Islands Division. Each division is led by an Assistant Secretary or Director, and we meet weekly as a management board to oversee and monitor our progress. Each division has responsibility for a particular high-level goal or goals under the Statement of Strategy. Goal A, which falls to our Culture Division, provides that the Department will support and develop engagement with and in arts, culture and creativity by individuals and communities, thereby enriching individual and community well-being, and to promote Ireland's arts and culture globally. Goal B relates to the work of the Heritage Division and sets out to conserve, protect, manage and present our built and natural heritage for its intrinsic value and as an inspiration to creativity and environmental appreciation, as well as a support to local communities, regional economic development and sustainable employment. Goals C and D rest with our Gaeltacht division and provide that we will support the use of the Irish language throughout Ireland, will strengthen its use as the principal community language of the Gaeltacht, and will facilitate the sustainable development of island communities. And finally, Goal E involves both Gaeltacht and Heritage divisions, providing that we will work to promote North-South cooperation, particularly through the work of An Foras Teanga and Waterways Ireland. Core to the delivery of these strategies will be the development and enhancement of our cultural, linguistic and heritage infrastructure under the Department's €1.2 billion programme of investment for Project Ireland 2040. Other priorities areas for the Department are the delivery of supports for arts and culture, including the audiovisual sector, the delivery of the Creative Ireland programme to promote individual, community and national well-being, and the completion of the Decade of Centenaries commemorative programme. In the heritage area, we are in the process of developing a new national heritage plan, Heritage 2030, to protect, preserve and on protecting, preserving and promoting national heritage into the future. We have just completed a comprehensive consultation and we will be developing the plan in due course. Our activity in the Irish language will continue to focus on implementing the 5-year action plan for progressing the 20-year strategy for the language. Project Ireland 2040 represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity for the Department to protect, preserve and enhance our cultural, linguistic and heritage infrastructure. It has the potential to be a transformative investment, conserving our unique culture and heritage and enhancing opportunities to experience it, while also stimulating tourism and our local economies. The Department's investment plan under Project 2040 is an important vehicle in delivering these sustainable communities, valuing our built heritage through regenerating town centres, creating spaces for people to express themselves artistically or through the Irish language, while also providing direct supports for the development of local enterprise. It has also been transformative for the Department, bringing together for the first time all aspects of our heritage, cultural, linguistic, built and natural, under a single programme of investment with a holistic vision. A cornerstone of the Department's investment programme is the €460 million that has been set aside for the regeneration of our national cultural institutions. This year we have made progress on a number of key projects. We will see the completion of Phase 1 of the National Library and the commencement of subsequent phases. There has also been significant progress on the National Archives project, which will complete the decanting of its collection this month to facilitate the construction phase. I understand that we will also see that project tender completed this year. The Department continues to progress other projects through the appraisal and evaluation stages of their project life cycle, including the Natural History Museum and the Crawford Gallery in Cork. We also support the development and enhancement of regional cultural infrastructure through a number of schemes and initiatives. In terms of our Culture and Creativity programme, we have a major new strategy on the audiovisual industry, which is guiding the €200 million investment Project Ireland envisages in expanding this vital creative industry. This year alone, the Department will provide funding support of over €16 million to Screen Ireland to deliver on this strategy and to support the Government's ambition to develop Ireland as a global hub for the production of film, TV drama and animation. We are looking forward to the launch of Galway 2020 in September as our European Capital of Culture. Although it has been through some difficult times, a feature which is common among many capitals of culture, the programme will be ambitious and will commence in late 2019. A further strand of our programme under Project Ireland is the investment of €285 million in over 10 years in our built and natural heritage. An important delivery vehicle for this investment is the Tourism Interpretive Master Plan for key tourist sites and heritage amenities in our national parks in partnership with Fáilte Ireland. This will see us leverage our investment to maximise the value for money of projects across the Parks and Reserves network for the enjoyment of the 4 million visitors that visit those parks and reserves every year. We are also working closely with colleagues in the Department of Rural and Community Development on investing in a wide range of new trails and other visitor amenities in our national parks and nature reserves. In addition to the work in the National Parks and Wildlife Reserves, we are working to deliver on commitments to protect our built heritage through the Built Heritage Investment Scheme and the Historic Structures Fund, which leverage private funding, local authority structures and central government grants to protect our built heritage while utilising local craft and construction resources. The National Planning Framework under Project Ireland specifically recognised the importance of protecting our unique Gaeltacht and island communities, underpinned by a funding provision of €178 million to 2027. In this regard, we are working to deliver key capital actions in the 5-year action plan for the Irish language, while also supporting Údarás na Gaeltacht in fostering enterprise and supporting communities across the Gaeltacht. Údarás will invest some 10 million in these communities this year. In addition, we are working in partnership with Dublin City Council, Conradh na Gaeilge and others to develop a flagship Irish Language and Culture Centre in Dublin City Centre. The project has recently completed its feasibility study and is preparing to go to planning. Over the lifetime of the Project Ireland, we will invest in a number of peers projects to enhance access to our island communities. These are complex projects which require significant planning in terms of environmental impact, sustainable development and community engagement. They are also some of the most complex in terms of construction, given their location and the often challenging sea conditions. This is just a snapshot of what we are seeking to deliver and progress throughout the year and into 2020. We continue to work closely with colleagues in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform on the overall management and oversight of the programme. With the growing ambition for the Department under Project Ireland 2040, we also need to ensure that the Department is capable of delivering on these ambitions. To that end, we have undergone an organisational capability review over the past 6 months, which was signalled in our Statement of Strategy. This review process, which is part of the wider Civil Service Renewal Initiative, has seen us look closely at our capabilities in terms of demonstrating leadership in our sectors, developing policy and strategy, and implementing and evaluating our work. The review was undertaken by a team from the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, with our support, and was overseen by an independent external review panel. It is at the final stages of drafting and will be presented to Government once finalised. This has been a very useful experience and one which will enable us to enhance the Department's capability to deliver on its statement of strategy. In conclusion, increasingly it is clear just how broadly our work impacts on the lives of everyone in Ireland, as well as on how we view ourselves in Ireland and how we present ourselves on a global stage. With such a broad remit, our collaborative approach with our national cultural institutions and agencies, with other government departments and our North-South bodies and across the public sector, and with this committee indeed, continues to be essential to the delivery of the high-level goals of our Statement of Strategy and Project Ireland 2040. Gur míle magat.
Gur míle magat agus is léir ód méide cards and ráitas tosig keiko farsing as atá on remit again Ryan Agwiv. Our dúspáire bhí an tachta Healy-Rae. Danny.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you for this presentation here today, and thank you for coming to it. It's very important, and thank you for all the great work that you are doing. But I just need to highlight a few things that need to be done in the vicinity of Killarney and the National Park, and issues that are presenting for people. And while it's a massive attraction, the National Park in Killarney, for Killarney and for all of south of Ireland, for Kerry, it's a really massive attraction, but there are issues that need to be dealt with in regard. I suppose the primary one is access and traffic queues and jams going through Killarney is a big issue, and I'm asking you to liaise with the TII, because as it stands at the present time, the only access out the Muckross Road to the National Park is through Killarney town. There is no necessity in the world for that to continue, and I believe it won't continue, because we're not talking about places to park cars. The cars are actually parked on the National Secondary Road, starting at Khmer Place in Killarney, all the ways out the Muckross Road. Day in, day out, coming in, going out, people from up the country, whether it is Limerick, whether it is Cork, or wherever, they have to go around in through the heart of Killarney town. This is presenting as a major obstacle, and I fear that people will not see it being worthwhile to continue out to Muckross House or out to the National Park if they're going to meet this blockage every day that people try to go out there. And what we're asking for is for you to liaise with TII and to ensure that the link road or the bypass that was supposed to go ahead in 2004, that's 15 years later. Plans were given for it at that time, that plan be followed through and build that road from Lissabegeen to Castlelock and Muckross. And I'm asking each and every one of you, as I have highlighted this here today, I'm highlighting because it has been presented to me at different and various forums all through the days and weeks that I've been representing and years that I've been representing the people of Killarney and South Kerry. It's a major obstacle, and it needs to be addressed, and government at the highest level needs to take this on board. So then, when we talk about our roads, the deer, and you see, at this stage now, the deer are everywhere. But the national park, the biggest numbers. There have been serious accidents at Ballydowney to the west of Killarney. They're coming into the domain in Killarney town, inside the town. People are actually afraid of stags, and look, I have nothing against deer, honestly, I haven't, but there needs to be some way of addressing or ensuring that people who travel on our roads are safe. We know for a fact that a woman who had 3 young children was killed at Ballydowney because she swore to avoid a deer. That is the honest and gospel truth. Everybody knows that. That can't be repeated, or shouldn't be allowed to be repeated. I call in the chamber that the army should be actually involved to take a call. Now, I believe there are other ways as well. That I believe in Canada and other places, and maybe, I don't know, is it some of the Baltic countries, they have another system that if some animal is coming onto the road, some kind of a sensor picks it up and a light will flash, alerting a motorist coming on that there's something going to be on the road. We need to I haven't done any research on this, but I believe that facility is there, and as Killarney is surrounded by deer, and as we have just take the bypass road in Killarney, 18,600 vehicles go through that road daily. That's only one part of Killarney town. Thousands are going through the place, and people's lives are being jeopardised, and I'm asking your help in addressing this issue here this evening. More funding is required for the repair of paths in the vicinity of Muckross House. The width and the capacity of the paths need to be increased, because ever more, and it is very laudable, ever so many more cyclists and walkers are using these paths, and they don't have the capacity. People, have had near misses, bicycles sitting off of walkers and children and different things. There's an issue here that needs to be addressed. There's an old road, the Mangerton Road, leading on to Mangerton, and it needs urgent attention. The potholes, look, they're as big as that sector there inside.
The matter of roads is the Department of Transport or the local authority, but other than where it's on.
But to see, I honestly tell you, Deputy, our Chairman, that the local authority has no remit in this road, because it's a road, it's not under the. It's not in the remit of Kerry County Council. They can't go into it at all. So I'm asking the National Parks and Wildlife to see after this, because people are using it with their cars, they're using it walking, and it's a danger and a hazard, and it needs to be addressed. Now, the other thing that I'm very concerned about is the burning that took place this year in the National Park. And you see, going back a number of years, when I was in Kerry County Council, I asked that the national parks would ensure that they would have fire belts all around their property where possible, and to divide their property within their ownership, so that a fire bill, so that if it's fire started in one place, that it wouldn't, that it could be prevented from spreading into another place. This is only all common sense, and I asked for that at that time. I don't think, Chairman, that it has been addressed properly. And you see, the other thing we're told now, we understood that, like the north of Ireland, that people would be allowed to burn all through the month of March, but the Minister, in her wisdom, said this year that she would not allow burning in March. And you see, what people don't realise here in Dublin is, I'm sure she mustn't have gone to Kerry, because in Kerry in February we had an awful lot of rain, and as March progressed it got drier, and that's when the fire started. You see, so we need to realise here in Dublin that it's raining in Kerry way more days than it rains in Dublin, and we do need the month of March to have controlled burning. Now, when we're talking about that burning that took place, and thousands of acres were burned in this last episode, a lot of it started inside the national park. We don't know how, and I don't know how, and anyone doesn't know how. But those issues need to be addressed. And I'm appealing to the Minister in future years to consider the fact that we get way more rainfall in Kerry and in Killarney and in Manhattan where these fires start.
Okay, Deputy Healy-Rae.
Yeah,
just we have to give a chance for them to answer. I don't think they'll answer about the rain.
Just finish with one line.
Leitrim would be the wettest place in the country, and I presume most of these are not from Dublin.
I haven't said no while you were struck me. Just hedges along our roads. Hedges along our roads need to be cut for the safety of everyone that uses them. And I have no problem in the world with hedges within the countryside. I actually built hedges in my own land. I like hedges, and that's the gospel truth. But we must ensure that hedges in the remit of the national park, on the roadside, will have to be cut, and that this department here shouldn't prevent in any way of roadside hedges being cut in the name of anything, because people's safety are a priority with me and first and foremost. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Deputy Gurmaigot, and I'm pleased, I think, to tell you that actually there's only two of us from Dublin at the table here.
And even those of us from Dublin here kind of spent a lot of time in Kerry education.
Very welcome, but the Minister obviously.
And it did rain when I went to school there as well.
And in fairness, our two assistant secretaries on the culture side and on the heritage side, as you know, are both from Kerry. So just to say about Killarney, I'm sure. So they have a deep appreciation, in fairness, particularly around the park. And just to say about Killarney National Park, you were right. It's one of the oldest. It's the oldest of our national parks. It started in 1932, I think, and it also, along with Wicklow National Park, gets the most visitor numbers at 1.5 million visitors a year. So I might just ask Niall to comment on the details of the issues you raised.
Thank you, Catherine and Deputy. I counted 7 questions, so if I forget to answer any of them, you might remind me. Access and traffic in Killarney town, I'm very familiar with it. Killarney has always been a bottleneck. It's partially the price of success and partially the difficulty in getting around the town. And I think you will recognise that in the context of the existing bypass onto the N72, that the NPWS is very cooperative in ceding part of the domain to that bypass. We're very aware of the problems. You'll be glad to hear that the new car parking facility, or the revamped car park at Mucker's House, had been appealed to Abrupt Penal, and that appeal has been overturned, and we will be going ahead with that. We're in constant contact with the local authority around the traffic management issues, and we are acutely conscious of those. As the Chair points out, our remit is not around the extension, but no doubt we will be consulted on it. And as I say, we're acutely aware of the the importance of getting visitors safely to and from the National Park, and we will continue our dialogue with the local authority and with the TII in regard to dealing with that traffic management issue. I think it's been long running. Killarney is an absolute bottleneck, and the Deputy will be well aware of that, but we will certainly do our bit around that. On the deer, fencing the National Park isn't feasible. It just isn't. It's our largest national park, and I know the Deputy isn't suggesting that. We have a new management regime in place in Killarney. We've taken a very serious look at the deer population. Over 270 were culled in the present year, and we have to be very careful around how we balance that. And there's real reasons around animal husbandry, public safety, and so on and so forth. That is more than in previous years for a variety of reasons. The domain is part of the national park. The deer can come into it, and the Deputy is absolutely right.
Excuse me. Yeah. The domain, I mean, it is a house estate and road.
Okay, all right, not the domain itself.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. They are wild animals, Deputy. They will roam, and our responsibility extends clearly to wild animals within the national park. And we take our animal husbandry as seriously as we take our public safety issues. Anybody who approaches a stag, particularly a rutting stag, is asking for trouble, and they shouldn't. And we have signs to that effect, and the Deputy will be well aware of that. We will certainly look at the technology, Deputy. If there is a technological solution, we will absolutely look at it. And we're looking at a variety of technology interventions around fire prevention, and I'll come back to that later on, and habitat and species management. So we will absolutely take a look at it, and if the Deputy has any information, we've just done a partnership with the Canadian authorities, the administration that runs the national parks there. So we'll be looking certainly to share any technology solutions, for them to share any technology solutions they have with us. We're very mindful of the dangers on the road, and I know the N72 very well. It is a dangerous road. It is a narrow road built across some of the most scenic countryside in the country, and people need to exercise due care on it. We work with Kerry County Council in terms of signage, in terms of speed calming and all of that, and we will continue again in our dialogue with Kerry County Council, with the Chamber of Commerce, etc., in regard to raising awareness around the dangers of speeding or driving with undue care of that road. And of course we are conscious of the number of foreign visitors as well who mightn't be used to driving on the correct side. So we will continue to try to address those public safety issues. In regard to roads within the park, again, these are shared facilities, and cyclists and walkers alike need to exercise their use of those facilities on the basis that they are shared facilities. And the Deputy is very aware that we put a significant investment into the roads in the park, and I want to acknowledge the Deputy bringing things to our attention, and we're very grateful for that and your local knowledge in that respect. On the Mangerton Road, I'm not sure if it's an accommodation road, but I will take the Deputy's information and we will have a look at that. I doubt they're that size. That's not a pothole, that's a crater, Deputy. But we will certainly look at that, and if we can find the wherewithal within our budget, we will look to address that as best we can. But bear in mind, we have relatively limited resources, and we try and put those to best effect, particularly into the public-facing parts of the infrastructure. Well, we will take a look at Mangerton. On the burning, Deputy, very regrettable. It wasn't thousands of acres, just to be clear on the record. It was 175 acres. We have fire breaks within the park. These wildfires are wildfires for a reason. They, where they might go depend on prevailing conditions. The ground was extremely dry in Killarney. It was a tinderbox. And ironically, what arrested the spread of that fire were the efforts of our park colleagues, the fire brigade, and rhododendron, because the rhododendron was fresh growth. And I say that without any hint of irony, but that's just a fact. So every time there is a fire, we learn from it, and then we invest in where the fire breaks might go. Recently in Wicklow, we deployed drone technology, both as a prevention measure, but also as a detection and fire management measure. And I think it was extremely useful because it was the weekend of an orange fire alert. And that is technology that we will look to, because the key message is awareness. And we are still trying to determine how that fire started. It could have been a careless cigarette. It could have been somebody lighting a barbecue. We're investigating that. We don't allow the lighting of fires within national parks for a very good reason. But when you're dealing with 87,000 hectares, it's very hard to police. Every single hectare, and one can't legislate for a lack of cop-on and common sense. So that's how we address the awareness issue. On the extension of burning into March, again, the Deputy was there throughout the lengthy debate and contributed to it in relation to the Heritage Act. The analysis conducted by the National Parks and Wildlife Service involved an analysis of Met data from every station around the country. And that analysis told them, and that was the advice given to the Minister, that the rainfall in the 6 months of open season for burning was significantly lower, right across the country, including in Kerry, and I'm very familiar with rainfall in Kerry, than the 30-year mean. And the analysis conducted by our regional team said that in the circumstances that there was no justification this year for opening the pilot scheme that is allowed under the Heritage Act. And that was the advice which the Minister went with. I think at the end of February there were a significant number of wildfires in Wicklow. The Air Corps had to be called out to help to quell those fires. There was a significant amount of damage. That certainly fed into the decision because it told us, and the Minister said this in the press release, that it would not be the wisest in those circumstances where ground conditions were extremely dry. And our Met data went down to each of the stations, if you like, where ground conditions were so dry, it would not have been advisable to extend the burning season into this March. And I certainly accept the weather changed in March, but it was out of the burning season anyway, and they had the previous 6 months. In relation to hedges, and I'll finish on this point, Chair Gurmahut, the Heritage Act provides, firstly, it aligns the hedge cutting regime with the road safety regime, and that's a very important change. The road safety regime takes primacy, and I recall from the contributions the Deputy made that you made that point very well over the course of that debate. So it addresses that, and that was a long-standing anomaly that needed to be addressed. It also allows for the extension of the hedge cutting season into August, allowing the trimming of a season's growth on the road-facing side of a hedge, and I think that was welcome, and it's a 2-year pilot. We're currently working on the regulations around that, Deputy, and they'll be published for consultation, we would imagine, quite soon. So I hope I addressed your questions. I'm not sure if I left anything out, Deputy.
Thanks very much. And just to make one suggestion, when the fires do start, I can't understand why track excavators are not used to control the fire.
Sometimes, Deputy, you know this terrain as well as I do. It is impossible to get heavy machinery out to these locations. But where we can, we will.
Anyway.
Sorry?
Might know where they're all stored.
Well, I suppose.
But where we can, we will deploy that.
Someone might try to say, Chairman, that I'm saying that for myself, but I'm saying local excavators.
Local people will know best in most of these cases. That's what.
Well, I appreciate that, Deputy. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Deputy Collins, you wanted to ask.
Yes, thank you for coming before us today and outlining your programme today. Just on a few issues, because I have another meeting at 2:30 that I should be at. You talk about the audio-visual programme, and I suppose, look, I have to, and my assumption is that there's some funding going to film festivals for this programme, and I suppose I have to, commend you if you are funding film festivals after what we saw in Skull last week. Was phenomenal for a local community. It was slightly off-season. It just tells you the benefit it is to a rural community, that any bit of funding that they get goes to good use. Skull was literally packed for a whole week with all sorts of famous people and ordinary people that I suppose came to enjoy the Skull Film Festival. And I know that they have a lot of plans going forward, and they're coming before the committee here, hopefully in September, to explain where they've come from to where they're going. and I'd appreciate your department would keep in very close contact with him, because this is probably one of the best film festivals, the rural film festivals in the country. I think you have one.
We have Clonus
as well, yeah, I remember that, you're saying that. So look, I mean, I want to commend any support you've given to a film festival like Skull, and you know, it'll be very interesting to hear what they have to say when they come before us here in the months ahead. The islands, you know, and I have 8 islands off of West Cork, my own constituency, and I visit them quite often, because you know, they might be poorly populated, but they do need a voice. And there is no, I don't think I've ever heard anyone on an island giving out about the ferry service. And I'm assuming that comes from your side of it. And in fairness, you have to, you know, call it, as we say in Ireland, call a spade a spade. The service is good. It gives great connectivity between the mainland and the islands, and people are extremely happy, you know, that is there. But there is issues out there. And I would ask you as a department to liaise better with the islands on issues like Sherkin Island are trying hard to have a chaperone, and we have to encourage young people that have come from the island to live in the island to continue the growth of the islands, and that is not happening at the moment. And the chaperone situation, we'll say in Sherkin, and that must be in every other island. It could be in Whiddy, it could be in Bear Island, it could be in Long Island, it could be Cape, Dursey, Hare, or Garnish Island, where the situation is the parents have to stay and accompany their child on the ferry to take them out onto the mainland when the school is closed on the island. And they have no one to accommodate, no one to stay with the child, basically to get the child on the ferry and off the ferry for safety reasons. Them parents then, that means one of them can't work. And most likely the only option they have is to leave the island and to live on the mainland. And that isn't good enough. We should be here promoting living on our islands. And I brought this issue up time and time again, and everybody it's like a football. It's been kicked to one side. It's not ours. It's not our department. It's not our department. And no one has come up with a solution. And if people sat down, you know, they have to set up some kind of the SNAs in school. There has to be some kind of a system through the education, through the Ministry of Education, that someone like that could accompany them children to and from the ferry, basically, so that their parents can go to work and will continue to live on the island and keep the islands populated. Another issue, and it mightn't be on your side of it, is the housing issue, the social housing issue. People need houses on the islands the same as the mainland. And you look out, there's some great islands out in West Cork, like Bear Island and places like that. They need, and Whiddy, and they need new life. And the only way they can do that is investment in social housing, and to give them, their young people, an opportunity to have a home, to live on the island where they want to live, but they're being forced off the island because they can't, because they simply don't. There's no social housing going forward. And as I am on islands, I think there's, in most of the islands, probably throughout the country, but I can only talk about West Cork, there is islands community councils, and I would ask that maybe an umbrella group would be set up in these islands, that they meet with you maybe once, twice a year, and try and iron out issues, get maybe a closer, you know, relationship with you as a department. You know, as I said, my brother was running in the local elections, and I went out to the islands canvassing because I wanted to hear what they had to say. And you know, I was out in Bear Island. They were telling me they can't get access to the mooring, basically, so that they want to I suppose come on and off their boats safely. And when they come out onto Castletown Bear, they can't get access to it, and they're going through very dangerous situations to be able to access the mainland. And these are small issues, but they're very, very important issues to the islands. I just want to talk about the burning very briefly, because Deputy Healy-Rae has touched on it. I chaired a meeting when this passed through the committee, and my assumption was that if the Minister changed that, the Minister was totally out of order to do that. My assumption was that they would allow burning in March, and that's what we passed here in a vote. And it was a majority decision. Everybody is entitled to debate it, and that has changed. And you know, if you live in a farm, and you live especially in a rural community, especially in West Cork, where the fog and the dampness is difficult to I suppose, blow over until May or June, March is the only opportunity where a controlled burn can take place. And now that has been stopped, basically, by a minister that got instruction from this committee that it was to go ahead, And when it got to somewhere where the powers that be, someone with a pin stuck it off. So someone in mid-Éamon seems to have more control than we have. Somehow I can gather, if that's from what you're saying there. And the other thing is the rural regeneration funds. I'm not sure what your budget is. Is it 363 million? Is the arts budget? Maybe I stand to be corrected on that. I was a bit frustrated that local community voluntary organisations didn't get funding. 48 projects in Cork got no funding, basically. I'm representing people of Cork under the rural regeneration funding. 48 projects. And some of them community voluntary groups spent 500,000 of local community money to get projects off the ground, and they still were told, sorry, you didn't this and you didn't that. But you have a budget of 3-something million, and you got money on the rural regeneration funding. And look, I know you say, well, we applied for it, we're entitled to it, and I accept that, but it's a very unfair system. If you have a budget, you shouldn't be, tapping into other budgets where local community voluntary organisations have the hope of competing with you, because they haven't got the expertise or the funds to tick the boxes, and they hadn't getting any help from the department, Michael Ring's department. So I'm going to just say, I know you'd say, look, that's there for us to take up, but it's where did that money go? I don't know how many million was 8 million. Your department got, maybe I stand to be corrected, but you got so many million, and you have more than 48 voluntary groups in West Cork got zero.
Go Margaret, just
Okay, thank you, Deputy. I'm going to ask some of my colleagues to come in, but just to say, I suppose, starting with the islands, we're subsidising 14 different ferry services to 14 different islands, which includes the islands you referred to. And since 2013, that's facilitated 2.5 million passenger journeys, actually. So clearly they are lifeline services. I'm glad to hear that you haven't had any complaints. We're very cognizant of the issue that you referred to, and Sorcha might just talk to you about that now in a moment. Also in Sherkin, I'm really glad to say that we're supporting the BA in visual arts there with 120,000 in funding. So social housing isn't a matter for this department, but again, we do work across departments, and actually everything we do in our department is really working with other departments because our reach is so far into everything. So we're very happy to take that up with the Department of Housing. On rural regeneration, you're right, our budget this year is 355 million or 56 million when you round it up. We got 9 million in rural funding. I mean, that is a policy issue for the Department of Rural and Community Affairs. But I would say about the funding we got, it was all on the Gaeltacht and the heritage side. So it was all about investing in our national parks. It is about rural communities. Everything we do, or a lot of what we do, is about rural communities, and a lot around improving infrastructure in Gaeltacht areas. So we will put it to very good use for citizens in rural areas. On the including Cloncarriff, yeah, that's right. We have a project, and you might fill us in on that actually in a second, Niall. Then also on the festivals, I'm really glad to hear your feedback on the festivals. We do fund festivals directly in the department, as does the Arts Council. Very much what we do. And then Creative Ireland, for example, on Quinún and Óg, which is not festivals, it's a day of creativity for young people. We'll have 700 events right across the country next month on Quinún and Óg. So we are very much seized of that idea, really coming from the Decade of Centenaries programme, seized of the concept of empowering local communities and the sense of well-being and empowerment that gives, and how it sustains jobs and people and communities. So anything we can do to help, we certainly will. I might just ask Sorcha maybe to come in on the specific issues on the islands.
Deputy, to be aware, we've been working very closely with SIDS in particular in Sherkin in order to try to get a solution to the issue around the school transport. As you know, the department has put up funding for an additional sailing in the morning in order to address that problem, but I understand that there is still that issue in the afternoon. We've had a recent meeting with one of your colleagues here, Senator Lombard, and the Department of Education, and a representative from SIDS in order to try to come to some resolution on that. But I take your point entirely that it's a very important issue, and we're working very closely with the different community groups to try to improve these services and to keep them running. They are, as Catherine has alluded to, they are lifeline services, and we are very, very aware of that. Your point about the umbrella organisation is point well made. There is Corn in Ullán and Cohan in Ullán. The department has, we met with them recently with the Minister of State in the last couple of weeks, and we're going to be attending meetings with them on a regular basis throughout the year to make sure that we're aware of the issues that are arising on the islands across the country, and to try and be able to intervene as early as possible to get solutions to those. A recommendation that we've made and that the Minister of State has taken is the example of the interagency you have functioning down in Cork. It's a really, really good, healthy debate. Meets quarterly for those who aren't aware of it, and it's chaired by the County Council. However, there's representatives from the HSE, from the department, from the council, and all the real players are around the table. Representatives come in from all of the islands and can air all their issues there. I think it's a very good model that we're trying to roll out in the other counties that have islands associated, in order to be able to get in there early and to come up with solutions on these problems. We're also looking to develop an islands policy, and as Catherine said, this cross-cutting element of the department to be able to be an advocate and a voice for the islands. While we mightn't be able to effect change directly ourselves, and policy areas, like for example, we're not responsible for housing, but we can advocate for the island communities, and that is my role to do that, and the department's role, and we fully intend to develop that and to roll that out further. So while there are some initial issues, I'm very glad to hear that you appreciate the work that is being done with the ferries, and that we are bringing the numbers, even for Sherkin alone and for some of the islands, have gone up substantially in recent years, and it's great to see that added life in on the islands.
I might just add to that, Circa, just say, as I said, the Minister of State has asked us to look at policy on islands. We have a fairly good track record, I would think, in dealing across government in other policy areas, and in Gaeltacht, in terms of like our engagement with the Department of Children, and particularly the Department of Education on the language, is very, very strong. So he has asked us to look at that, and we are putting in place new staff in the department. We're taking on extra people in the department to actually specifically address islands issues. So just to add to that. Niamh, did you want to mention Glengarriff?
Only very briefly, Deputy, and I want to come back maybe to the burning point as well, if I may, Chair,
yes,
just to address that raised by the Deputy. Again, as you know, we have a very good nature reserve in Glengarriff, and that is part of the set of rural projects that are being funded under the Rural Development Fund, and very clearly they had to be rurally based. And we view the national parks and reserves, all 85 in total. There are 78 reserves and 6 national parks, and they're the fulcrum of local, social and economic activity. They had been underinvested for a number of years, and they were the kind of projects with that kind of spin-off that were suited to the Rural Development Fund. So we take an all-of-government approach to this, Deputy, and it wasn't certainly that we were competing with local communities, and indeed many of our projects are in partnership with the local authorities, so that they're not single entity proposals. And if there are communities in the vicinity of Glengarriff, or indeed any of our national parks and reserves, that the Deputy would like us to work with, we're very happy to do that. These parks and these reserves don't work and don't survive without engagement with the local community. So we'd be delighted to do that. Maybe we can discuss that on March. And again, I want to acknowledge the Deputy chairing of that committee. There was a lengthy process in relation to the Heritage Act. I don't have the Act in front of me, but I recall that what the Act says in Section 7.1 is that the Minister may make regulations to allow the burning of vegetation during such periods in the month of March and in such parts of the country as she may determine. And as I say, the decision that she made after a public consultation and based on advice from the National Parks and Wildlife Service and what was coming in the context of that public consultation, of which metadata was a part. And you'll recall from the debate that, you'll know anyway, there's a 6-month open season for burning from the 1st of September to the 28th of February, half of the year. And the proposal was in March. And during the course of that debate, there was a lot of discussion about what would determine. And one of the things was the weather in the previous 6 months and the weather immediately prior to it. And the weather last autumn and early the part of this year was exceptional by any standard. People were walking around in T-shirts in February, which led to very dry underground conditions and a series of fires in Wicklow and other parts of the country that took a huge effort by ourselves, where they impacted on parks, and by the fire services, and ultimately by the Air Corps to bring under control. It is a pilot initiative, Deputy. We certainly, nothing that the Minister has done is repugnant in any way to the decision the Oireachtas made and to the decisions made by the committee. And again, there was a public consultation on this. When it comes around next year again, we will be consulting publicly and again with members of the Oireachtas who have an interest in this issue before giving advice to the Minister on how to proceed.
Okay, Shanador Fintan Warfield.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to the Department officials for coming in. On page 32 of the 2040 booklet, it stated, under the Creative Ireland consultations, there was a widespread, and I quote, a widespread desire for creative spaces, studios, performance spaces, simple workspaces where artists and other creatives can experiment and collaborate. And that the Department then would work with local authorities to identify spaces. In the plan, I can only assume that spaces comes under, in part 3, or page 17, that spaces comes under investment in local arts and cultural infrastructure nationwide. I certainly can't see it falling under any of the other commitments with financial whatever. So, has the Department started this process? What work has been done to date? And I suppose, can you clarify if that 40 million would include those spaces? You know, a building always seems to be like the answer to everything. And I suppose at this point in the plan, I hope the right questions are being asked, and will that space be relevant in 10 years' time? What art forms will be practiced in 10 years? And how will it improve the financial well-being of artists who we know earn around 10 grand a year? You know, ideally a building is the end point of a much deeper development. And I'm of the opinion that the money identified in this plan, that those financial commitments could be greater. But let's take it as read that that's the money available now. In the environment where artists are struggling to make ends meet, I suppose, is it wise to not prioritise spaces as much as we prioritise the national cultural institutions? I know some of the national institutions haven't been looked after over a long period of time, but they're all in Dublin, and we're in an environment where, as I said, artists are struggling to make ends meet. Should artist spaces be prioritised to make the lives of artists easier?
Thank you, Caherlock. Yeah, we are obviously very seized of the need for artist spaces. We do support facilities such as Anna McCarrick up in Monaghan that actually support artists, provide critical support for artists to get the time and the space to practice their works. And we do have some initiatives just in relation to the cultural institutions. I would say we do have one in Cork, the Crawford, of which we're very proud. A lot of the work that they're doing is not just a nice to have, it's a need to have. So the library is in the process of moving its books now out of the West Wing, which will actually secure them from a health and safety perspective, from a fire perspective and from a damage perspective. So there is a safeguarding of the collections that's really, really important in terms of the investment in the cultural institutions. And you're right, Senator, we haven't invested in them because of the recession and other factors in decades, and they need that investment. And we saw from the National Gallery the kind of inspiration that it provides when those new spaces are opened, and the safety, the feeling of security for the collections. But maybe, Conor, if you want to just take back up on the artist spaces.
Yeah, under the National Development Plan, we have a proposal at present with Dublin City Council to look at identifying a sum of money. I think that issue has come back fairly strongly in feedback generally, and it came back in our Culture Ireland engagement with the arts sector back at the end of January as well, that because of development and the growing economy, that artists typically move into those marginal spaces, perhaps, that there are fewer of them and that it's more difficult now. So Dublin would probably be the area where that's most acute. So we're seeing what we can do in the first instance in Dublin. More generally, in relation to the national cultural institutions, the way the government accounting works is funding available for capital and funding available for current purposes, and the two aren't always interchangeable. The Department obviously made a bid in relation to the National Development Plan to maximise the resources for the purposes to which it could be applied. And I suppose the outcome has been, in fairness, that there is a substantial programme now for the NCIs. On that front, I would say that, again, that perhaps historically there has been some underinvestment in the national cultural institutions going back over the decades, and there is a demand there, as the Secretary-General has identified, in relation, for example, to the National Library. We've had a situation whereby there's been a risk associated with the storage of the collection of the books in the West Wing, which has been well known for some time. That has now been addressed by the development of the new storage in the old NCAD building adjacent to Leinster House. So in the coming weeks, as those materials migrate, that risk will have been mitigated very significantly. And there are other issues around, from everything from access for people with disabilities, for example, to the Natural History Museum, to issues at the National Concert Hall in relation to the operation of that building that really require to be addressed, that are in the ownership of the state. But I suppose I wouldn't like to characterise one as being necessarily at odds with the other. I suppose
choices have to be made. I'm of the opinion that there's enough money for both.
Yeah.
But there clearly isn't. Is that investment in local arts and culture infrastructure nationwide, is that where a space would come under? On page 17 of the Investing in Our Culture, Language and Heritage.
That's all capital funding.
Yeah.
Capital for regional.
But sure, artist space is capital.
Yes.
They're both capital.
Yes.
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 So can I assume, when we hear commitments from the department about artist spaces, that that's the area that the artist spaces will come under? I don't see artist spaces written in any of the financial commitments.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's 40 million versus huge sums of money. National Concert Hall 78 million.
Well, again, I
80 million.
suppose going back, I suppose the thinking at the time that the National Development Plan was being drawn up, there was very significant investment during the previous decade in relation to local arts infrastructure, particularly in regional locations around the country. There are quite a number of art centres that were built under the access schemes in the late 90s and into the 2000s. Question mark was more around what was the priority. Was 40 million euros enough to deal with the emerging demands, the maintenance of those facilities, or other demands that might emerge? And I suppose, in fairness as well, you're in something of an evolving situation. The rate at which the economic growth is taking place, the pressures on artist spaces is an evolving and emerging issue to some degree. But there is provision or scope within the National Development Plan to respond to those pressures. And as I say, we're engaged with the local authorities in the areas where those issues are most acute.
And we'd be very happy to see proposals coming forward from local authorities actually on artist spaces. Very happy to see them coming forward. And I would mention as well that actually we have increased funding for the Arts Council significantly in the last year. The Minister secured a 7 million increase in their funding, and money that goes to the Arts Council goes to artists. It's another piece of the jigsaw in terms of supporting artists, but we are cognizant of particularly the issues in urban areas, the pressure on buildings generally, and obviously the impact that has on artists.
My concern with the Arts Council monies is that we can put 20, 30, 40 million extra into the Arts Council and it will be spread, but the people moving from project to project will still be earning €10,000 a year, won't do anything to address security in people's lives. The capital is an opportunity that we can kind of offset some of the costs and some of the pressures on people. The negative effect of not having creative people in our city centres is well documented. Creative flight, migration, whatever, to Berlin or London is where I'm seeing friends go. So I just think more could be done, and political priorities obviously have to be made in terms of the next, up to 2027. And I don't see artist spaces as being right up there with the likes of the cultural institutions. I'll move on just to the hedgerow conversation, in the last 6 weeks, we've seen some high-profile cases around hedgerow cutting, destruction inside the time where hedgerow cutting is restricted under the Heritage Act. Cuttings in Offaly performed by Irish Rail, on the M7 performed by Kildare County Council, and the vegetation cutting in Trinity College, Dublin. The protection of national heritage and biodiversity and conserving our natural and built heritage are commitments from the department in this plan. And just considering that all of the cases that I mentioned are performed by state bodies and are possibly outside of the law, is the department aware of it, and will there be action taken?
Thank you, Senator. We are aware of those 3 cases. They are being investigated, and we're in discussions with the bodies involved. I can't go any further than that at this stage, because there may be very good, valid safety reasons why these works were undertaken, but they are being looked into at the moment.
Okay, I accept that. Just finally, we had the copyright bill back in the Seanad. I withdrew an amendment that was, or I accepted a department amendment to withdraw, to delete my previous amendment that I won in the chamber around a digital deposit scheme. You spoke about safeguarding our collections and that being a priority here today. There doesn't seem to be a lot of urgency from the Minister in Minister Halligan. And I'm constantly told it's one or the other, it's yourselves, or it's, if I'm talking to you, it's Halligan's department. So can you give me an update on where the digital deposit scheme is at in terms of us losing our digital memory very fast, and most web pages disappear, not websites, web pages disappear within around 100 days. So we're losing our national memory, and I'm anxious that there isn't a lead being taken on it.
Again, I understand that the National Library is engaged in collecting archived websites, and I can get an update on that for you. In terms of digitalisation, generally that legislation is not ours, but there is a fund under the National Development Plan for digitalisation that's aimed primarily around national collections or other projects in terms of cultural content, if you like, that's there, and that's about promoting access and engagement and providing opportunities for people to engage with national collections that can't maybe make the physical journey to visit a national cultural institution, as you say, in Dublin. But I'll get you an update in relation to that matter, in relation to the role of the National Library, sir.
The National Library have all...
And maybe to add actually just to what Conor said, Gaeltacht and Senator, we have funding of 2.3 million actually going out to mainly to our cultural institutions for digitisation, 550,000 to the National Gallery, 272,000 to the museum, 675,000 to the library. Obviously they're heavily involved in digitisation. Emma 284,000, the Chester Beatty 200,000. They just launched their digitised collection, which just really makes it not as much a Dublin cultural institution, but actually just opens it up not just to the rest of the country but the rest of the world. The National Archives €120,000, and obviously everybody's aware of what we did with the census and the success of that, the huge success story that was, apart from preserving what's there. The Crawford Art Gallery in Cork, 18,000 for digitisation. The Church of Ireland Representative Church Body Library, 100,000. The Irish Traditional Music Archive, 100,000. And the Contemporary Music Centre, 20,000. So they're all fundings we're giving out for digitisation. We're very alive to the importance of preserving the collections through digitisation, as well as through the structural works that we're doing in the institutions.
Just come in and I'll let Lovely split in. I will have to go shortly to another meeting, so I might ask Lovely Smyth maybe to continue the chairing, so if I have to go. But on the digitisation, I think 10 million is minuscule in comparison of what's required, given the scale of the amount of material. So it's about 95% of the museum's material which is in storage and never digitised, so we don't even know what's there, what's gone missing, kind of which material is gone, and that's why it's outside of the value of putting it online available, or at least recorded in some way. If I can appeal at all from the national collections that kind of we do as much as possible, and I know the fund is there over the period of the strategy, but that if at all possible, because in the middle of that strategy, and I've been trying to get the Minister to fast-track the publication of the census in advance of 2026, and for a whole range of reasons. But it's not the only collection. It's every single one of the national institution has a store and a wealth of material which they want to share with the public and with the world in such, that we have an opportunity. And I know it takes a lot of money, and there's only a certain amount of expertise in the country, but just it would be one of the little bugbears I have. So if you want to answer that, and I had a whole load of other questions, but kind of, the hedgerows and the roads of Killarney overtook my time frame for today, but we'll come back to it at a lower stage.
Get the Cathaoirleach, and we'd be happy to engage with you bilaterally if you want on those other questions you might have. Just to say, I suppose, on digitisation, on the census, I think the difficulty is legally it has to be 100 years, but also from our own perspective, the 2011 census and the earlier, the 16 census, where there had been a project of semi-digitisation done already, which made it much easier. We had to go right back to the drawing board for the
It's more the
1996.
past ones. It's the ones, the historical ones. So there was a 1911 census. There was none till 26.
Yes.
So there's a 15-year gap,
yeah.
and it's that to do with the decade of centenary, as I had argued. Kind of. Anyway, it's in the lap of the minister because of the 100-year rule. But given the interest that was stored up in the decade of centenary and the huge interest, one of the more successful digitisation is the pension records, and kind of anybody, and just kind of the interest that awoke in people's families. More and more families are looking at their own heritage, their own genealogical, and a lot has been done online now, which helps people. And that in itself, if you look at how many hits on these sites are coming from abroad, it is a tourism resource outside of being a historical and a genealogical resource for us here, but it's a tourism resource that you can encourage people. Here's the material, but now come to Ireland and find out kind of where this, that and the other happened. So I will deal with the Minister. I will be republishing my legislation, but change slightly in the next week or so, to try and encourage them to bypass the 100-year rule, which the Senate encouraged in the past to be 75 years, and kind of that was passed and kind of then ignored or whatever by the Seanad.
I think here, look, there may still be issues, even GDPR issues around people who may still be alive, but aside from that, there's actually a physical issue, and we are planning a digitisation project, but actually it will take years to do. Actually,
we understand. That's why I want to start now. So
all right.
At least I had published it in 2013. I think I first published in the hope that it would be finished by this year. But now, if we can start it now,
but I think even starting now, it will take us years. So, but we're onto it, I suppose. And just to say, maybe just to mention the Beyond 2022 project, actually a digitisation project being run by Trinity College.
You may be familiar with this, the expert advisory group advice that you have access to as a member of the All-Party Oireachtas Committee clearly is published, but there is a proposal there to reconstruct as much of the archive records that were lost, the 700 years of material blown up in the 30th of June 1922. So it's a very exciting project that's still at an appraisal stage, but it offers the potential, again, both in partnership with the National Archives in the UK, Public Records Office of Northern Ireland, in the current context with the North-South dimension and East-West. There's very many positive elements to that. and there are a great many sources that they can go to explore for duplicates of records that can be digitally recreated and made accessible then again as part of the commemorations programme. As I say, that's a recommendation in the advice that's been accepted by the government and is subject to appraisal at the present.
And we might just, on that note, just offer our condolences to the family of Seamus Lawless, because he was one of the key players on that project from Trinity College, and to his colleagues in Trinity.
Yes, I think that'd be appropriate from all of us here.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I do have to
Thank you,
escape. I have to save more stuff. You're free rein now.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, folks. Sorry I missed the first part of your presentation, but I just had a few questions from bits and pieces that I've heard here today as well. Crinne na Nóg, I've heard it advertised quite a lot nationally, and it's wonderful to see. I have a very straight question. Are you confident that the professional artists taking part in all of that, that they will receive a professional fee for their expertise? I think I heard a figure there of 700 and something projects, or so I think that would be really important. I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about your involvement in the Irish show for the Venice Biennale. What your involvement for that has been, and maybe talk us a little bit through your experience of that. I'm wondering, is there any sort of collaborative, conversational relationship with the the North of Ireland show in Venice as well? Okay, are you working complete in silos, or is there any sort of collaboration on all of that? We talked a little bit about film festivals, and I see some nice literature here on it. I'm just wondering about the Clonus Film Festival, just to get very parochial, your involvement with them, if there is one. And of course, a topic that's been very much in the headlines has been the Market House in Castleblaney, which is a building of huge significance, both historically, culturally, heritage. We know that it was actually used as a signature piece for the Architectural Biennale in Venice as well. And as we know, it's really fallen apart. And I'm just wondering, I know I've had meetings myself with the department, I know Monaghan County Council owns the building, but I'm just wondering, from your own aspect, what are you doing, or what the involvement is of the department to ensure that that building is saved, preserved, conserved, and a plan for its future put in place? Because, as Senator Warfield already expressed about artist space, there wouldn't be that many of them out in Monaghan or Cavan for that matter. I know we have got the Tyrone Guthrie Centre, but we could do it in loads more space. To me, it would be an ideal venue for something like that, and I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about that as well.
Thank you. Look, on Crinne na Nóg, Creative Ireland, yes, our policy is to pay all artists. So our Director of Creative Ireland isn't here at the moment just to confirm that, but I think you can pretty much take it as read that they are all paid, any of the artists involved. It's obviously Crinne na Nóg is curated down through the local authorities as well. So
part of the criteria that the local authorities have to ensure that artists wouldn't be just taking part voluntary, as we know artists are wonderful at doing, at sharing their time, their space, their expertise, but is it part of the criteria with the local authorities that artists are paid a professional fee?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I can confirm that to you, but yeah,
okay,
pretty sure it is. Just ensure, obviously, you know, in the Venice Biennale last year we had the very big success of it being curated by our own architects, the Architectural Biennale. This year I might ask Conor to talk to you just on the Arts Biennale this year. We did go out, a delegation from the department did go out to it. The Clonus Film Festival, it's probably funded by the Arts Council, I imagine. I don't have details on it now, but we can definitely come back to you on it. And the Market House and Castleblaney, I might ask Niall to talk to you further on that. In fairness, you've had quite a deal of dialogue with us on that, and a lot of parliamentary questions to the Minister on that. So we're very familiar, and we do have schemes, the Historic Structures Scheme, to deal with buildings like that, and again we liaise through the local authorities for the local authority to come up with proposals for us. Conor, do you want to just start?
Just a minute, so Eva Rothschild curated the Irish Pavilion this year. That's supported by the department in partnership with the Arts Council. So both the Arts Council and the department through its Culture Ireland office attended the opening in Venice for that event. Culture Ireland obviously also do the liaison with Arts Council Northern Ireland in relation to their primary role of supporting artists and travelling overseas. to build their audiences and establish networks and support their work. So in the nature of that bilateral engagement, they would engage on other matters as well, but primarily it is we support the Northern Ireland that is separate, but we do have a relationship in terms of the agency within the department that delivers that support. I suppose that runs until November this year. I think we were intending to provide the committee with information about showcase events that are supported by Culture Ireland and Irish artists being supported and travelling overseas, including Edinburgh Festival, etc., and Venice, for the information of the committee in case there was events or showcases on there that might be of interest.
I just wondered, I was surprised that the committee actually wasn't invited over. You talked about the department, the delegation of the department going to see that show. To me, that is the critical show internationally for contemporary art practice. It's really important for Ireland, and I think it would be important that this committee would at least be out there to see that at some point. And I know it's open until November. I just wonder, is it not protocol that the committee would go to see that show? There's nothing to preclude the committee. If the committee decides that it wants to go and attend and see, but absolutely, look, I think we'll make it our business to make sure that the committee is aware at the start of the year of the full programme of showcase events, and then if there's anything of interest to committee members, we'll try and facilitate. We would facilitate whatever engagement. I think that would be important because it was open and everything. There's very little talk about it in here and very little communication on that. And as I said, as a former contemporary art practice practitioner and curator myself, I think that the committee should be, there as part of the opening to meet with the artists, to see the space, to see the exhibition, and of course see what's happening internationally. Yes. Ultimately, there matters for the committee themselves to decide as to what events they would like to attend or visit. But it certainly, absolutely.
Yeah, and we might just look at how we might engage. I mean, this committee has done an awful lot of work, done an awful lot of very valuable reports, including your most recent one on arts matters. So we might just think about how we might engage in terms of signalling to you events generally that are coming up in the calendar. Yeah, I think actually that would be of interest to the committee. And going back to the Architectural Biennale, and I know we're getting on to Castleblaney in the Market House, was there some possibility of that show coming to Castleblaney or something like that? Because the building itself was used, I think, as a model building in terms of its architectural significance and all of that, no?
I will have to check. Wait, sorry, excuse me. Sorry, Catherine, Mayor.
Didn't hear, but we'll follow up with you on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Castleblaney. Again, it probably couldn't use the Comer Market House, and you know well why, because it's in dangerous position at the moment. And we were delighted to facilitate the recent meeting, Deputy, with Katrina Ryan and our colleagues, Katrina's head of Built Heritage. We are continuing to liaise with Monaghan County Council and Paul Clifford and his colleagues there in regard to what is possible. I think you're very familiar. It may not. We're in the business, I think, of salvage and repurpose, if I can put it like that. And you're absolutely right when your colleague Senator Warfield was asking those questions earlier on about artist spaces. There is funding available on the heritage side, and buildings are best when they are reused or repurposed, as distinct from just being, there as a pretty picture, so to speak. So we would certainly welcome proposals from Monaghan County Council under either the Historic Buildings Fund, which will be opened again in November for next year, or under the Built Heritage Investment Scheme. And as you know, the Heritage Council did single Castleblaney out in the context of historic towns last year, but unfortunately it was unable to accept the funding around this particular building because of the state that it was in. So our door remains open to you, Deputy, and to Monaghan County Council to discuss what might be done there. Have you received any sort of potential plans for it? Not that, to be honest, Deputy, not that I am aware since your meeting with colleagues, I think, in the last 2 weeks. Yeah. But again, we will continue to follow up, and we've said clearly to Monaghan County Council, who are the owner of this building, we will work with you. Okay. In terms of what comes forward. So we will be open, we will be practical about the salvage. And I think that's the business we're in here, salvage and repurposing of that building. Unless there are Sorry.
No, as you would know,
I know the
Katrina
building,
was
I've seen it,
very
yeah.
helpful at that meeting, and we
Yeah.
brought a lot of the community activists, if you like, in Castleblaine that, you know, dearly love that
Yes.
building. It's in a prime position within the town. So we have opened that invitation to, well, reiterated your invitation, if you like, with Monaghan County Council. And we'd hope we'd be able to facilitate that with the department and with Monaghan County Council to ensure that there's something concrete in terms of a plan put in place, and of course money to make sure it is salvaged, if you like, because it is a stunning building.
And I am familiar with it. I've seen the building myself, and I absolutely agree. And if the opportunity in terms of repurpose is around an artist space or a performance space or a multi-purpose space for the artistic community, and I would stress, Senator, as well, of course, the national cultural institutions are also artist spaces. But yeah, well, that too. But we will look to continue to work constructively with Monaghan County Council on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Was that the end of my questions? It might have been. yeah, I think it was. Was there... Okay, if there are any more questions... Oh, Senator Warfield, yes?
The architectural policy, is that progressing?
In a word, yes, Senator, and not as quickly as we would have liked. It is nearing conclusion. We made commitments to have it back out publicly by the end of the year, but it is at very advanced draft stage. I think we've concluded most of the consultations at this point.
I think it
Yes.
would.
And just to say that Niall and his team have been very focused on Heritage Ireland 2030, 2,000 submissions they got, public submissions, and I think 70 consultations worldwide, so they've been busy, but we are absolutely on to the architecture policy as well.
I think it would be important to reflect the kind of feelings and desires of graduate architects and younger architects as well, who are kind of frozen out of that whole sphere.
There's a meeting we can facilitate around that, Senator. We're happy to do so.
Okay, I appreciate that. Can I just ask one last question on nightlife? There was a meeting recently held, a consultation with stakeholders around the nightlife. You know, we're losing artist space, or not artist spaces, we're losing... That's not me. We're losing venues and places to dance and to socialise, like, I mean, culturally significant places, not just drinking factories like Harcourt Street. Places that really contribute towards the culture of the city, we're losing them. And I suppose they're being strangled by licensing laws. Workers in the sphere pay most of their money to get taxis home because there's no transport. And we spoke about how this department interacts with all the others. I mean, 24-hour transport is one issue of the night. Licensing laws in terms of Department of Justice is another one. But this is probably an area where relationships are forged and collaborations are forged and artists make money, and I suppose the culture has been hollowed out by hotels and tourism, and so I don't think it would require a huge amount of money on the part of government, not just yourselves, but in terms of reforming licensing laws so we can make it more rewarding for artists or creative people and promoters and musicians who make their money at these hours, who don't necessarily need a grant, that there are livings to be made, and that we're holding that back, basically. So I welcome the moves in terms of the nightlife. It's something I've been talking about for a while in the Shannon. Will the report, can we expect a report soon? Will there be a report, and will it include recommendations from across departments for those departments?
Yeah, the meeting took place in April in the Irish Architectural Archive and was convened at the Minister's behest to get the views of stakeholders on a whole range of issues. We have an interest in nighttime culture. Culture Night has been a great success in recent years, but you know, to what extent could you increase the usage of cultural institutions, rolling openings later in the evening, things of that nature. What was the feedback around the issues around culture and creativity? And I suppose the issues that you're speaking about, Senator, were brought into sharper focus around the closure of the Tivoli and District 8 and that back in the autumn. And there was a lot of, I suppose there was newspaper coverage as well in terms of the impact that was having on the sector. So I suppose people have come together, they've given us their views, we've condensed those into a range of issues that have been identified. Many of them are outside the remit of the department, and as you know, there have been structures put in place in other jurisdictions, night SARS or nightmares and different terms used, to facilitate that engagement and to address issues which are raised. So we're now in the process of bilateral engagement next in relation to some of the other government departments involved and perhaps Dublin City Council to condense down into a number of concrete measures that could be brought forward for consideration.
Yeah. I'm not opposed to a nightmare. I feel like it's just because we haven't placed any focus on this issue for so long that we suddenly need a nightmare, but we know what the issues are at the moment, and I don't think that a night SAR or a night ambassador should be the main focus at this point. But I was at a meeting earlier this year. There was 300 people in the Sugar Club, I think, yeah. You know, huge demand out there for change in this area. And, you know, the Catholic Church don't run the dance hall anymore. It's following on from civil marriage, from repeal. And in terms of a political meeting, there were way more people at that early event than I've seen at any other, you know, meeting for marriage equality or for repeal of the 8th Amendment. So there's a huge demand out there and an appetite for change. And I just think it really suits the department. I think we need people, champions like yourselves in there running with it.
Senator, so if that is the last question, that concludes our considerations of this matter today. Once again, I'd like to thank our officials in the department for being here with us today and your assistance with our committee meeting. So the meeting is now adjourned until Wednesday the 12th of June at 1:30 p.m.